who are still living in the world. Well, DePaul University develops leaders the world needs through an uncommon commitment to liberal arts, and I'm pleased to be on stage this morning with two of them. Welcome, and thank you for joining the Alumni College Keynote panel. Wishing you then what we all do now, how DePaul is facing the mental health challenges of its students. Featuring my classmates, Meg Kissinger and Gene Rudolph, class of 79. We'll be joined later during the second half of the conversation by John Mark Day, Vice President of Student Affairs and Dean of Students, and Trevor Uhas, Assistant Dean of Student Wellness and Director of Counseling Services. Meg Kissinger is an award-winning American investigative journalist and author of While You Were Out, an intimate family portrait of mental illness in an era of silence. The book was named as one of the best memoirs of 2023 by Amazon, Audible, and Goodreads, and was chosen as editor's choice by the New York Times and the Los Angeles Times. The Atlantic said it was one of the 6 books that can change the way you think about mental illness. Jean Rudolph Scott is the granddaughter of a newspaper publisher and, as a student, was the editor of DePaul. Jean grew up in this world of words and stories in the small town of Macomb, Illinois. She is a former associate editor with Chicago Tribune magazine and editor of the paper's women's news section. Join me in welcoming Meg and Jean.
You're on, Rudy.
Okay. Oh, okay. Meg, congratulations. This is like an amazing accomplishment and a wonderful book and highly acclaimed, and everyone who reads it absolutely loves it, as you know. And I know it was a long time dream of yours to write it.
Yeah, up that, yeah.
Can you hear me? Now, okay. So tell us about growing up in a big Catholic family in 1960s suburbia, and how fun and chaotic that was, and then how you came to the idea you might want to write about it.
Right. Well, first of all, it is a joy, first of all, to be at DePaul with all of you. Yay, wonderful. And then to be with one of my dearest pals in the whole world, little Rudy. So you may remember that our senior year, we were the dynamic duo, right? So editor and managing editor, and then we flipped that. Rudy was editor second semester of the DePaul, and we had lots and lots of fun. And it was a heady time. Well, for everybody, but your question to me about what it was like growing up in my family, well, those of you who've read the book know there were a few things that went on in my family, but it was a family of great love and great warmth, but also, sadly, a family that was dinged by mental illness. And in that time, we just didn't have ways to talk about it. Rudy, you knew about that because you and I are dear pals, and you were over at our house many, many times.
I know.
And just before the previous panel, one of my sister Patty's friends, high school pals from Regina Dominican, came up to me and was remembering how fun it was to be at our house. And it was a lot of fun. It was a little bit like DePaul, It was a fun place to be. Everybody wanted to be there. There was some misbehavior, but a lot of warmth and love. And what propelled me to write the book was that because we didn't have the language, we didn't know how to talk about mental illness in that time. And as my first, as my mother struggled with her depression, and then there followed, each of us really struggled in our own ways with some form of what we would now call mental illness. We didn't in the day. But I was lucky enough to have a job as a newspaper reporter. After I graduated from here, I went to upstate New York. Because of my editorship at the DePauw, the guy who was the Kilgore counselor, the newspaper advisor that year, hired me. And I remember I had a job in October of senior year, and I was crowing all over campus about that while everybody else was struggling to wonder what they were going to do next. I'm like, sorry, I already have a job. Anyway, but I was fortunate to have a job as a newspaper reporter where I could ask total strangers the questions that I was too scared or too ashamed to ask the people that I love the most. So I got my own little do-it-yourself education in mental health as a newspaper reporter, and I came to learn really how poorly we treat people with mental illness in this country, well, really in this world, but my focus was on this country, and in how we set them apart and talk about them in different ways. We regard their illnesses in ways that we don't if that illness is like cancer or heart disease. And what I knew from being both a daughter and a sister of people who struggle with big-time mental illness was that they are human beings, first and foremost, and they're suffering. And nobody wants to be depressed. Nobody wants to be anxious or confused. But we have a hard time understanding them. And so what we do or have done for so many centuries is to set them apart. And whether that was building asylums and putting them on the outskirts of town where nobody would have to see them or think about them, or turning the other way when we would come upon them on the streets. But because I was a family member of people who had those illnesses, I was drawn to them. So anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying after all those years as a reporter covering the failures of the mental health system in this country, I finally thought, the one story that is just bubbling up inside of me that I really want to tell is the one that I'm most afraid to tell, and that's the story of my family. So that's what I did.
Well, tell about the...
You got to go like that. You got to use your microphone way up.
Oh, sorry. Not used to this. Right. The title of the book.
Yeah.
How did you?
Oh, yeah.
How did you pick that out of? I know there were many possibilities and many different chapters of the book, but that's kind of an interesting.
Sure. So
story.
It starts at Lucy Rowland Hall, where I lived on the 3rd floor. Yay! And I was coming back, this was March of freshman year, so we're talking March 1976. And I came back for my intro to poli-sci class for lunch. And as you recall, in those days, pre-cell phone, there was her name Mrs. Mack? Who was our, Kinsey, who was our, or Lady Pamela?
Yeah.
Who, Mrs. Mack? Yeah, so Mrs. Mack was the lady who took the phone messages. Anyway, there was a little pink slip in my cubbyhole, and she handed it to me looking kind of nervous. And there were 2 words it says, while you were out, and then 2 words, Grandma died. And I'm like, Grandma died? So, I knew she was not a young lady, and she was not in good health. But anyway, nonetheless, it was, kind of heavy news to get on a little pink slip with 2 words on it. So I ran down the hall and went to the payphone and called my mom. And I'm like, Mom, Grandma died? And she's like, oh yeah, sorry. I had so many people to call. Like the funeral's Wednesday. So anyway, I just thought, well, that's ridiculous. But when I was putting this book together, I thought, that's really a metaphor for how our family dealt with kind of tough news or, heavier topics. We just always had a wisecrack or a punchline or, dark humor was our safety net, or that was our shield. And so I just thought, well, that was an apt metaphor for how we just dispatched of things so glibly when what we really needed to do was to sit down and talk and absorb those questions.
Yeah. What was it like coming?
Got it. Microphone.
Sorry, keep yelling at me until I get it.
I've
just
been
think
yelling
I'm
at you
talking
for
to
40
you.
years. I'm not going to stop now.
I can't see anybody out there.
45 years I've been yelling at you.
Yeah, almost 50 years. Almost 50 years. So what was it like coming back to DePauw after the summer when your sister died by suicide and you came back and you were editor right off the bat there?
Yeah.
Did you feel supported by us, by your friends, by the school, or did you feel like you just wanted to kind of forget everything and?
Yeah, it's such a good question because it really unpacks, or it has so many layers to what I'm getting at here with the book. So my sister Nancy died in June of 1978, so going into our senior year. And Rudy, you and I talked on that. We drove down together, and we were talking yesterday in the car about Rudy remembers getting a phone call at her summer cottage up in Michigan, probably from John Faulkner, I think. But anyway, somebody had called to tell her that Nancy had died. And so I do remember, I write about this in the book a little bit, it was a blur, you know. So as I describe, the night that Nancy died, you know, my father gathered us all into the living room, and he looked at us all very intently and said, in no uncertain terms, you know, if anybody asks, this was an accident. So that was ridiculous because my sister, poor soul, had been so sick for such a long time, and she had tried so many times to kill herself. So we knew that wasn't going to fly, first of all. But what that did was really frighten us. And I just want to say a little thing about my dad's motivation on that. You know, again, in that era, it was such a shame. I mean, frankly, it still is in so many respects. But we're Catholic. So he was legitimately nervous that my sister would not be given the benefit of a funeral, because in the eyes of the Catholic Church at that time, you know, suicide is considered a mortal sin, and you were denied a Catholic funeral and a burial in the Catholic cemetery plot. The church has improved a lot in that area since then, but in those days, that's how it was. So I spent that summer, you know, we didn't discuss this among ourselves. There was no family therapy. So Nancy died on a Friday night, late on a Friday night. The wake was on Sunday. It was Father's Day. The funeral was on Monday. And by Tuesday, it was back to business as usual at the Kissinger family. You know, summer jobs, the little kids were at baseball or basketball camp, whatever. We were off living our lives as though nothing had happened. But of course, something terrible had happened. So by the time I got back to campus in August, or 2 months later, I was still rattled, quite rattled, but I didn't know how to talk about it. Jean called me, maybe even that night or the next day, whatever, so kind. You know, she reached out and just to give her condolences. But we just, that was a rarity. John Faulkner just told me, I have no memory of this, that I called him to tell him the news. I said, was I drunk? He's like, probably. Anyway, that was really, so when I got back on campus, I was so grateful for the distraction or the focus of being the campus newspaper editor, and it really gave me a place to focus my energies. And I was just on a panel a couple months ago in Fort Wayne, Indiana, with Melissa Hunter from the class of 80, and we were roommates at the time, and she was remembering that I said to her, apparently in passing, she's like, hey, I said like, hey, Michael, you know, how's it going? How was your summer? My sister died. Okay, bye, I gotta go. And she was like, her jaw had dropped. She was like, whoa, like you just threw that piece of information in there. Anyway, as the semester rolled on, you know, I wasn't handling it well. I was drinking too much. The guy at Toppers was like, you again? And, you know, I was confused. I remember Keith Updahl's class. I took a class on Saul Bellow and Ernest Hemingway. And of course, Hemingway died by suicide. And Dr. Updahl referenced his suicide in a way that I found to be offensive. And I remember running out of the class and crying and going to the newspaper office. And I didn't have a foundation or a way to talk about it in a healthy way. I write about this in the book, and it's true. I got in trouble from the Thetas for, not my buddies, the Thetas, but the old ladies who set the standards, because I got drunk at, I think it was the Monon Bell, and did the bump with the tiger on the 50-yard line. And they were like, that is behavior unbecoming of a Theta.
So, but no one suggested there would be somebody at the university to talk with, or you were not really on board with counseling or wanting it or anything like that?
I mean, I probably was too scared to talk about it. I was too ashamed. As the title of my book suggests, it was the era of silence. It was much easier for me to do my Winston Churchill imitation, or, I don't care how you do it, you must sink the Bismarck. It's much easier for me to be the class clown or run around than to actually get my butt in a chair and talk to somebody intently and seriously and to process that. I remember talking to Mom Walters, the Theta house mom, about it, and she was very dear. But no, Tom Emery, our newspaper advisor, he and I talked about it a bit, but I couldn't imagine that there would be an office here on campus that would have anybody that I might go and discuss that with. So, I process it in not healthy ways.
Right, and those of us close to you felt like we may not have reached out enough and, tried to help, and probably just had no idea how to even handle it.
You know what? I hear that a lot, and I just want to say to those of you who I knew back in the day, if I would have needed that, I didn't know that I needed that. So I think if I had, no remorse, no regret, I don't hold a grudge. I didn't know myself what I was looking for there. It's a very confusing and, it's a very obviously upsetting experience to lose a sibling by suicide. So I have nothing but affection and gratitude to those who I went to school with and to DePaul. DePaul, I'm going to get a little teary-eyed, I think, but I remember winter term, senior year, and I had been the previous winter terms. I worked at a newspaper in Bluffton, Indiana, but I think I just knew instinctively that I wanted just a big break from all of that. So I took piano lessons, which the last time I took piano was at St. Francis Xavier in 3rd grade in the basement of the convent, and that didn't work out too well. And anyway, I took piano lessons, and so for 4 weeks or however long winter term is, Blake Tollefson and I hung out in the Theta living room. We didn't make out or anything. We were not romantic, but we did. Everybody else made out on that Theta rug, but I did not. But anyway, but I think that was such a tender time, a restorative time for me, and I think I just innately found a way to just settle myself. I still suck at piano, by the way. I can tell you where middle C is, but I can't read a note.
So, Meg, this has been...
Up.
Thank you. The book is a wonderful public service, and you have helped countless numbers of people with their issues. But in so doing, you really had to put yourself out there and your family out there, and no holds barred, it seemed like, How hard was that, and were there parts parts of the book that you debated about, like maybe I should put this in, I should not put this in, or how will this affect my siblings?
It was super intense. So when I finally decided to write this thing in the way that it needed to be written, I had many false starts. So for a long time, I wanted to be a fiction because there's a lot of tough stuff in there. And there was stuff that I just thought, oh my God, I can't ask my brothers and sisters to let me go there. So I tried for many years to write this as a fiction, but I'm a hardwired newspaper lady. Like I'm not clever enough to write fiction, and I'm just like, I'm too beholden to facts. So finally I'm like, damn, if I'm gonna tell this story, I'm gonna have to do it the old-fashioned way, and I'm gonna have to do it the way that an investigative reporter would do it. So I'm gonna file freedom of information requests for the police reports of the day that my brother and sister died. I'm gonna get the court records of my brother Danny's very humiliating court cases, plural. I'm gonna interview people, firsthand accounts. I'm gonna get the medical records for my mom and dad and my brother and sister. And I'm really gonna go, as the kids would say, ham on investigating my family. But before I did that, I went to each of my brothers and sisters separately and said, we have an opportunity here to tell what it's like, to bear witness and show what it's like to live in a family with profound mental illness and what the consequences are when you don't talk about that in the ways that we need to. And it was a little bit of a calculated risk, but not really, because my brothers and sisters are amazing. And I love them so much. And I knew that they're generous people, and they agreed with me that we need to talk about this. And then having lost 2 siblings to suicide, as my sister Patty said, no three-peats, like, let's talk. So they graciously, gave me the thumbs up, and that's what I did. So, it took a while, and then COVID happened. So records requests and stuff like that got delayed a little bit. I had to be declared executor of my sister Nancy's estate in order to get her medical files. So that was a hoop that I had to jump through. But I really did go after this in a very investigative manner. And then I found out stuff about both, me and my family. Okay, quick naughty story, since Jerry Sweeney set the bar with that maypole line. So, kids, any of you kids in the audience, don't have unprotected sex, and don't do it in high school. And then if you do that, don't write about it in a book. Okay, so I was on the hammock last summer, right before the book came out, and the advanced reader copies had come out, and my phone rang, and it was my son, and he was like, Mom, chapter 6? And I was like, oh, snap. And then I'm like, don't slut shame your mother. I'm sorry, it was a crazy era, but my kids were good. They were not naughty like I was. But anyway, so everybody, in my family was gracious enough to share, as I said, intimate details. And those were necessary not for the sake of revealing things. This was not meant to be what we call in the newsroom trauma porn. This was meant to be informative. It was how readers could better understand. So I'll just say quickly that I took a class on how to write a memoir, and the woman who taught it, her name is Marion Roach Smith. So any of you out there who are going to write your memoir, take a class from her. Anyway, what Marion said is, your memoir is not about you. And I was like, what? I really want to write about me. But no, it's about what your readers can learn about themselves because of something that you went through. So what I wanted the readers to learn is that shame is toxic and shame can kill. And mental illness is an illness like any other, and we need to find the ways to talk about that. So in order to do that, I did have to tell some, intimate details, which make me feel like I'm naked when I walk into a book talk. but whatever.
Well, I think all your readers really appreciate what you did because you really laid all yourselves bare, and it has helped so many people. So we all thank you. And how do you feel like your years at DePauw shaped you and helped you get where you are today?
Yeah, well, hanging out with you helped a lot.
Yeah.
And I think I know that being editor of the DePauw was very formative. So, learning to stand up to authority, learning to ask questions. We were so mean to President Rosser. And my dad said, I put this in the book too, when I walked across the stage at graduation, he's like, I don't know who was smiling more broadly, you that you finally got your degree, or that guy for getting rid of you. But so because the newspaper was independent, we really let the administration have it. We asked tough questions. And I think I know the friendships that we forged, in the pub building, those are lifetime, precious friendships. The Theta House, so dear to me. I confess that I wasn't the greatest sorority sister. I would skip meetings sometimes because I had stuff to do at the newspaper. I was always falling asleep in the bum room where I was supposed to be studying, but I was always too exhausted from both the newspaper and toppers. But the tender friendships that were forged at the Theta House, I also have to say, in the meantime, and by the way, I also every once in a while, if I had time, would go to class, and so I took some fantastic classes here. So it really, I'm very grateful for the foundation, and I wouldn't have gotten my first job had it not been for DePauw, and that launched me, in a career in newspapers. So yeah, all gratitude. That means I have to contribute more to the Alumni Fund. I will, I promise.
So what advice can you give people who are struggling with their mental health or have family members who are struggling?
Yeah, thank you for that question. The best advice I can give to people who are struggling with somebody that either their own mental health or somebody in their family who has issues is what my brother Danny wrote to me in the week before he died. Danny sent me a letter really acknowledging for the first time that he had mental illness. We all knew that 30 years ago, 30 years before he, but he finally, I think the medication that he finally took gave him a little insight into himself, and he finally acknowledged that he was suffering from mental illness, and he was apologizing in this letter. And what he said was, it causes you to do and say awkward things, and it's very embarrassing. But really, the answer to it is love and understanding. And when he wrote that to me, I'm like, well, that's the cheesiest thing I've ever heard. But then the more I thought about it, it's the perfect algorithm. If you love somebody, you're going to work to understand them. And if you understand them, your love for them is going to grow. So after he died, I wrote that down on an index card, and I taped it to the side of my computer in the newsroom. And that became my battle cry. And, for the next, 30-some years, I went all over the country and, wanted to learn the stories of people who suffered in this way and didn't get the kind of care that they needed. So one of my favorite quotes comes from Tom Insel, who was the director of the National Institute of Mental Health. And he said there's two kinds of families in America: those with mental illness and those who don't have mental illness yet. So it affects every family. And so my best advice is to find ways to get that language, to have those conversations with the people that you love. Let them tell you about how scared they are and how lonely and how confused. It's not easy because, that old expression that hurt people. And that's very true. Living with somebody with serious mental illness is quite a challenge, and it can be soul-crushing. But if you keep that in mind, if you just settle yourself and find the way to love them and to understand them, life will be a lot better.
Absolutely. Now, will there be another book in your
Oh
future?
my God in heaven. No, this one almost killed me. No, I am a grandmother now, and I want to just go off on a little ice flow, and yeah.
Okay. So what have I left unasked?
The password to my computer? No. Nothing. No, I think this was perfect. And I think this is a perfect segue to invite
up
Kyle back up. And afterwards we're going to have a little time for Q&A. But we thought it would be a good idea. So, I don't want to just get up there and talk about myself. Well, secretly I really do. But I've just done that. So, I always think it's very important to include the mental health professionals and let people know, what is being done. And, in our era, again, 79, it was Dr. Roof or nothing, and Dr. Roof was really just secretly for like birth control. But anyway, so the good people here will come up and tell what's going on
Trevor
now.
and John Mark? Way to go. Hi.
Hello.
So, could you introduce yourselves and a little bit tell us what you do here at DePauw?
So my name is John Mark Day. I'm the Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students. And I've been at DePauw. I just finished my second academic year here. So I work with sort of the full student experience outside of the classroom, including our student support, student success, our opportunities for students to get connected and find that belonging and learn and get engaged. So I really appreciated so much of what you talked about because this network that you clearly have, right? These connections that were so important for you. It is our hope that we can create a space at DePauw where every student has those friendships, those relationships that they can really draw on. So it's so meaningful to hear.
And I'm Trevor Uhas. I'm the Assistant Dean of Student Wellness and Director of Counseling Services here at DePauw. I've been here 5 years now. I'll just reiterate something that was previously said in terms of having those good people around you in that support system. We know that one of the best predictors of good mental health, of strong mental health, is personal relationships, right? And having supports and connections and people that you can be vulnerable with. So we talk a lot about that in my area, in my office, but also just campus-wide about making those connections and having that support group.
I just want to say that I am so grateful for the work that you do, and it's so important. We can't learn about Chaucer or mathematics or art without having mental wellness. Without, we need to be in a place where we're healthy in our thoughts and our spirits. I'm just a little brag here. So my daughter Molly is a mental health provider at Tufts University, and that's her job, is to identify students who are struggling and to plug them into services. And I'm so excited to learn about what DePauw offers in that regard. So can you explain to these good people about what you're all about and how students can access good mental health care?
Sure. Our office has grown a lot over the last several years, and we really have put a priority on being able to offer students different services that they need at a given time. So we know that not every student needs to come in for individual counseling. We know that not every student needs a group experience, but we offer options, right? We offer those opportunities for students to come to us and see what we do have to offer that can meet their needs at that particular time. It might be a quick consultation. It might be some brief counseling sessions. It might be partaking in an educational activity. It might be talking about something that might require more of a referral. It might be psychiatry needs. But the menu of services that we have grown and been able to offer to students, we're very proud of, and being able to really comprehensively capture the needs of our student population. And an important piece of that is just making sure that we, as counseling services, as a staff, are doing our part to help decrease that stigma, right? To make sure that we have been more visible to the students. We're out on campus more. We're doing tablings, we're doing workshops, and letting students know, again, that there are multiple points of access for us and multiple points, opportunities for them to help seek.
Let me ask you that. Thank you for that. What happens in today's DePauw if a student shows up and her sister has died by suicide the summer before and she's doing the bump with the tiger on the 50-yard line?
Which part of that should we address?
I mean, community standards up
That's
here.
right,
I don't
that's right. So one thing that we do have that I think is so important right now for students is we have what's called the care team. And so this is a group of professionals that works with Trevor's crew that if there is a student that we are concerned about for any reason, there's somebody that they can call, and we have a case management triage model of a group of folks, and these are faculty, these are staff, these are folks who interact with athletics, interact with housing and residence life, anybody who may be in an orbit of a student. And they get together and they talk about what they know about the student and the best way to support them. Because for so many of our students, the best person to offer that support, that connection, may be their coach, or it may be the person in their residence hall who sees them every day. It may be a faculty member. And so we are going to identify somebody who may have a relationship with that student that can serve as that connection point to go to them and say, hey, maybe that wasn't the best choice that you made. Maybe there are some concerns here, some things that we want to talk about. Can we walk you over to counseling? Can we really get you connected directly to those supports? And if we don't have somebody that we know that the student knows, then we'll create that relationship. We'll reach out to that student and start building that relationship so that they can have folks that they know on campus, professionals, that they just feel that connection to provide that direct support. So I think that addition of the care team has been a really, really wonderful intervention to provide those resources to students.
So this is just a little historical context. This is a true story, too. Was it our sophomore year? I can't remember. It was our sophomore. Okay. My Theta sisters and I remember watching in horror as unfortunately a guy next door in the Fiji house shot and killed himself. And the ambulance came, took him away. We all kind of stood there, mouths agape. But correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, nothing. There was nothing from the university. Again, this was just a different era. What would happen today? Walk us through how you would deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that, and that still on any campus is just, I mean, that's one of the things that, for my role and my colleagues, I mean, that's something that keeps us up at night, right? Everything about that, how a student gets to that point themselves, but then also the impact that has on other students. And so what would happen is a multi-layered approach of folks working with any student that we might feel was affected. And so that means there's going to be people in the Fiji house, but there's also going to be people in the Theta house. There's going to be, Trevor's team is going to be there. We also have some additional resources that we can call on through telehealth counseling, right? We've got additional supports that we can be providing. And so there our fraternity and sorority life staff will be there. And so there's going to be folks really trying to be thoughtful about who is this affected, and who is this affected right now at 11 o'clock at night, and who's going to be affected about it tomorrow when this student doesn't show up for their 9 a.m. class. How is this going to impact their faculty? And so trying to be really thoughtful about those ripple effects and who we can be putting in position to be serving as those connections, to be serving as those sounding boards in that moment. But then also, I mean, we know with trauma, there's the moment, but then there's the 6 months later and the year later and these things that continually be resurfacing. And so how can we be providing students those connections? Who can we be connecting with them there then? So that way, once something resurfaces that's a surprise, they have that person that they already know that they can go to.
Yeah. When I first got here, right, mostly what we were talking about was intervention, okay? Once we got kind of a better handle on interventions, we started shifting to prevention, right? What are some prevention efforts that we can put in place? And now we're shifting even more to what John Mark's talking about, postvention, right? What happens after something happens? How do we address that? And my office, my area, in really helping all of campus to recognize when something happens, how can we be proactive in reaching out to folks that may have been affected, right? How can we go to a chapter house and offer them a group debrief experience? How can we go to a department chair and offer that for a class? Connecting with different student organizations, right? So again, making sure that we are being very visible, very proactive, reducing, that stigma or some of that secrecy to say, hey, we can have open conversations about this. We can come into your space. You don't have to come into our space, and making sure that we are making those connections.
Yeah, I think, and that, I really want to highlight this work that Trevor and his team have done, because what happens in those moments, it's not, here's this random person showing up that I have no idea in this moment. It's, oh, here's Mallory walking in. We know Mallory. We can talk to Mallory because she's been here for this and this and this. And so these pre-existing relationships that his team builds with folks become so valuable in those moments to provide that support.
It's so interesting. I sometimes eavesdrop on my daughter's work when I'm at her house, and I can hear, even though HIPAA, but I can hear her talking on her end to her colleagues doing just that they've identified a student who is of concern, something has happened either with that particular student or in her family, and they're on it, and it's really, it's wonderful, and it's really that they take so much care, because universities, they have that's where it's their home away from home is the university, and these are young kids. They're 18 to 21 or 22 years old, and their brains aren't developed yet. There's a lot of substance abuse too. I made all these jokes just now about, doing the bump with the tiger and stuff, but that is kind of the first line of defense often in a mental health crisis, is to grab a cold one.
That's right, and that's why, folks even like in our community standards area are tied in with Trevor's folks, tied in with the care team, because you're right, so many times the first indication that a student is having an issue is a behavioral problem. So they've done something wrong, they've violated community standards in some way, but the reason they've done that is because they're coping in a really unhealthy way. Right. And so as that comes out in the conversations our community standards folks have, they're able to provide those connections and provide those referrals that way.
That's awesome. Do you think we should open it up to questions from the audience?
Yeah. Sure.
Yay. Okay, so Kyle or somebody, you want to be Vanna White and take a microphone around? Oh, we've got people. Yeah, good. Thank you. Oh yeah, is that Rocky? Okay. Yeah, Rocky, you go.
I have just a general question. Not having a career in academics or university, administration and strategies, I've just heard that Tufts University and DePauw University have developed models and executed models for this type of support. Is this occurring more and more across the country in the university settings? Is it an emerging thing? I'm just curious. Because I'm impressed at what's going on here, but I don't know, are we isolated right now, or is it growing?
So this is something, college student mental health obviously has been a topic for, generations, right? We, though, are paying more attention to it. This is a growing area, and so I think it's not new and it's not unique to DePauw. What is unique to DePauw and what's unique to every institution is how do we deliver it in this specific context with the students that we have? What's going to be most meaningful to the folks that we have here? Because what is most useful for a DePauw student actually is probably different than what's most meaningful for a Tufts student. Definitely what's most meaningful and useful for a student at IU. And so contextualizing what mental health looks like on our campus, on a residential liberal arts campus in rural Indiana. How are we making the most of everything that we have to provide the best resources to our students, that's what every institution is thinking about for themselves. So the topic is universal. Every university is going about it in a different way.
Rocky, you're on.
Hey. Thanks, Muggs. I don't know. Does this work? So thank you, dear. So I have a question for the university. So can you hear me now? So coming out, growing up in a family or a lifestyle that was, if it even came out of the closet, it was very barely, okay? But now we're coming out of an environment with young individuals who have been through COVID isolation, and they have not learned how to speak with other people. But also in a very small campus, how do you deal with shaming? People finding out that you have gone in for some type of, and how do you approach these people in a non-confrontational way so that you can benefit them?
That's a great question. Again, what we try to model is, openness, right, and being able to set the stage for students to have conversations, for faculty, staff to have conversations with students. And we certainly want to address shaming, right, if that is happening, if that goes on, and be able to create safe spaces for students, but also address kind of campus-wide, like why that's problematic, right, and how shaming really inhibits students' abilities to help seek and to feel comfortable with one another. So we really want to be able to look at it from all sides and be able to address it appropriately. We are finding, with a decrease in stigma in help seeking for mental health services over time has been great. With COVID and kind of coming out of COVID, it's decreased even more, right? So students who are sharing these common concerns during COVID time are now looking at each other and saying, oh, okay, yeah, we all sort of went through this thing together, and that help seeking is actually improved, and acceptance of each other and each other's struggles have improved that way. So it's really been good to see that. The sort of flip side to some of that could be a student saying, well, I went through this, other people went through this, but maybe what I'm going through isn't as bad or doesn't require as much attention as somebody else's. So then we have to do some just extra validation there, right? Like validating those issues and concerns and struggles. So yes, again, to go back to your original question, right, creating safe spaces and making sure that we are addressing behavior with students and helping to grow this overall sort of culture of care on campus where students are learning how to display empathy, right, compassion, connection with each other, and making that an institutional priority.
I would imagine every year a number of students leave DePaul. Do you do exit interviews or speak with them or reach out? Two reasons. One, to check if there's a mental health issue at all or a substance abuse issue at all. And two, to also try to understand if there's something systemic happening at the university that might be causing those departures.
So the answer is yes, and. So we will ask students, if we know that they are transferring out, that they're stopping out, we will ask them why. The two caveats to that, one is there's very little motivation for a student to answer that question because if they are leaving, they don't have to, they can just stop coming. They don't have to answer the question. And then two, students in that moment may or may not want or feel like they can be completely honest with us. So the answer that they'll give may be part of the reason, but it may not be the whole reason. And so finding why students are stopping out is an important piece of information. But I think this other piece around really identifying trends, both with students who are stopping out and the students that we currently have, talking with Trevor's team about What are you seeing when you're talking with students in a clinical setting or when you're talking with them in an educational setting? What are the things that are coming up? What are the topics that we tend to see? And that's something that we really try to do pretty regularly with our professional staff so that they are getting together to identify what they're seeing on campus, things that are rising, things that maybe were an issue last year that aren't as much this year, so that educational folks can be on the front edge, making sure that we are being proactive about addressing those things.
And I understand that you can't compel someone to talk, and there'd be reluctance, and perhaps you don't get the full story. But I think the important thing is the trying.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. That's right.
Hi, my question is for Meg. You had talked, two things that you said struck me. One was that you said the person said there's families who have mental health issues and then there's families who don't have mental health issues yet, right? That and the fact that your daughter, Molly, has chosen the career that she has. How did you talk to your kids, especially with the genetic component that sort of runs through everything?
Right.
How did you start talking to your kids about it? Like when and how truthful, right? I mean, I feel like it's something that everybody struggles with when they've got mental health in their family is how to start to talk about it, particularly when you're processing your own grief, right? And how did that evolve with you and your kids?
Yeah, and actually somebody could write, they probably have written books, entire books about how to talk to your kids about the mental health in their family. So my family illness is bipolar, which we now know is very genetic. We don't know enough about it yet. And so that's kind of scary, right? It's, if you don't know how to, well, there's certainly no cure, and even the treatment is a little hit or miss. But how I talk to my kids about it, so my sister died when I was in college. My brother died many years later. So my kids never knew my sister Nancy, but I always talked to them about the fact that I had a sister who died. And it was age dependent, like when they were tiny, I didn't discuss it, but as they got older, they knew that she had died by suicide. And then Danny, they knew. So that was tough. They were in middle school, and I talk about a little bit in the book about how I didn't want to make it seem like that was a healthy choice, but neither did I want them to be afraid of their, vilify their uncle and to be afraid. So it was a tricky thing. But my kids have grown up, knowing all about my family history and all about, what I did as a journalist in exposing the failures of the system in the lack of adequate numbers of care and the discrimination in the insurance industry, the hoops that people have to go through to access care in the first place, the horrible housing conditions for people who coming out of asylum care. So they're very comfortable talking about that. It's still gut punching, and we're watching very nervously as the next generation is coming along and the mental illnesses that we're seeing in that next generation. But the good news is that they talk about it so much more candidly. My students I taught at Columbia University for 6 years, those kids don't shut up about how what they struggle with. I'm like, people, this is a journalism class, not a drum circle. But God bless them, and I'm so grateful that they have they are inclined to be much more open than we were. But it's tricky, yeah. That if I ever write another book, maybe that would be a good one. But I'm not writing another book. Alicia, you had a question.
This is more institutional question, but how do you manage the growing needs of students with the limited resources? As a faculty member at another private, small, liberal arts university, I have students having trouble accessing resources, sometimes going months without any kind of treatment. There are limits. The students will say, I can only go to the counselor this many times, per semester, and they may have a serious pervasive mental disorder that requires ongoing treatment. But after so many sessions, they're free, but after that, you have to go to the regular, go through the regular system, which costs you, which students don't have money, or the insurance that their parents have is crap. So how do you balance needs with resources?
Yeah, great question. And there's always been this struggle, right, with limited resources to serve our students. And we are finding really that the answer is finding more creative and more innovative approaches to offering students access to services and different types of services. So just to highlight very quickly, one thing that we've been doing through a Lilly endowment grant that we received a few years ago, we've been able to actually form a consortium partnership with 2 other schools in the region, Rose-Hulman and St. Mary of the Woods College out in Terre Haute, where we are able to do a lot of resource sharing for mental health services and programs and even staff. It's a myth to think that, well, if there's all this demand, just keep hiring more staff. That'll never end, right? The answer is not to just keep hiring more staff. But finding creative approaches through some telehealth platforms, through some psychoeducational platforms, through some opportunities for students to connect socially and build that sense of belonging, right? Sort of these foundational tiers all the way up to the higher need. And we've been working to kind of put that together and put together that sort of menu of service options to really reach our students, again, at various points and at the points that they might really need, right? So rather than say, no, you have to go to individual counseling for 3 sessions, it might be, let's have a one-on-one for 45 minutes and kind of see what your options are. Someone who really needs to get into psychiatry, okay, we can figure out a couple of options for that. And again, having that resource sharing model with other schools who are also have been struggling in that area allows us to do more, right, and to procure more because we have some extra funds to do that, and even share staff among each other, right? So being able to say to one of my staff, hey, St. Mary of the Woods is having a difficult time, we're going to lend you one of our counselors over there for a while, and they do the same with us. Particularly around what I was talking about earlier with postvention, right? When things happen on campus, let's bring some more folks in to kind of meet what's going on. So we're actually really proud and excited to be part of something like this. It is really unique in Indiana being able to do this. And it does help. It is, I think we're finding, is the answer to partner, to collaborate, to share resources, and not to stay isolated and think you're going to figure it all out by yourself with what you have.
That was good.
I have the microphone right here.
Well, and thank you all.
Sorry, I know you're on a time constraint here.
Please.
My question is for Meg. We have clinical depression in my family. I know that mental health runs the bandwidth and everything. And one thing I was wondering is, of your surviving siblings, I don't remember you addressing this in the book, but your family obviously hit the bipolar lottery. How did you, do you guys ever have like survival? Is there survivor's guilt? Is there ever a discussion with your siblings about, why Nancy and why Danny and why not me or Patty or, how did you guys deal with that?
Yeah, I did. And you know what? So let's talk about that a little bit because I think we're wrapping up here, but I want to just quickly answer it, but let's you and I talk after. But I will tell you that yes, the quick answer is yes. We have survivor guilt and also gratitude that we're still here. And we found ways, as I said, to have these conversations with one another. And we took Danny's good advice, to love and understand one another. So yeah, survivor guilt, woo, it's real. I think that's a good conversation for you and I to have, because I see Kyle standing there, and we have to wrap it up, people. We went over our allotted time. But can I just say, I'm going to be signing books in the back, and I would love to have intimate conversations.
I want to ask Trevor a question.
Meg is selling books in the back.
Meg, I want to ask Trevor.
You can have one.
Is it on?
This is at the special DePaul alumni rate right now.
You know me, I'm shy, but
$1,000 per book.
And just so, okay.
I've been very patient. It's for Trevor. You mentioned the word psychiatry, which we know is about drugs. Do we have a full-time psychiatrist here? And DePauw's in Greencastle, Indiana. How many psychiatrists are there in Putnam County or Greencastle?
Yes. So yes, psychiatry is one of those limited resources, right? But again, through our involvement in this consortium project, we actually have a couple of contract psychiatrists offering services to our students on campus, which has been great. So that is a need that we can meet on campus. And beyond that, we have a telehealth service, telepsychiatry as well. So that's also an option for students. So I'm very happy with where we are in terms of being able to provide that particular service to our students and really meet that need in ways we haven't been able to meet in past several years.
Thank you.
I will say, in the interest of time, I'm going to be at lunch. If you want to talk more about DePauw, specific resources or things for our students, I'd be happy to talk with you there as well.
So speaking of lunch is being served and will be served until 2:30. So there's plenty of time to meet with Meg, to buy a book, and sign your book. Again, thank you all.